Hello and welcome to another inspiring episode of Speed Bumps with Charlie Kimball. I'm your host, Charlie Kimball, where we share stories of life's challenging hurdles and the incredible successes that come with overcoming them. Today, we have the opportunity to chat with Griff Whalen, a dedicated individual from Toledo, Ohio, distinguished for his exceptional career in the NFL and his unwavering commitment to excellence in all his endeavors. From a young age, Griff's passion for football was evidenced, leading him to Stanford University, where he emerged as a standout college football athlete. At Stanford, his reliable hands, precise route running, and versatility on special teams earned him significant recognition, setting the stage for his impressive professional career. Now, Griff's path crossed mine when he was signed by the Indianapolis Colts, came to Indianapolis to play in the NFL. During his tenure with the Colts, he became known for his clutch performances and special teams contributions, solidifying his reputation as a dependable player on and off the field. But Griff's NFL journey didn't stop there. He went on to bring his talents to play with the Miami Dolphins, the San Diego Chargers, the New England Patriots, the Baltimore Ravens, and the Oakland Raiders. Throughout his time in the league, Griff consistently showed his dedication, work ethic, and ability to perform under pressure. Beyond his football prowess, Griff is also recognized for his commitment to a vegan lifestyle, a choice reflecting his dedication to peak athletic performance and overall well-being. His vegan diet underscores his philosophy of maintaining optimal health and conditioning, significantly contributing to his success on the field. With that, he was featured in the documentary From the Ground Up in 2017, highlighting vegan athletes. After retiring from professional football, Griff seamlessly transitioned into real estate and real estate investing, where he applies the same principles of hard work, perseverance, and innovation that defined his NFL career. His move to the real estate world highlights his versatility and ambition, and we have no doubt that he will continue to achieve significant success in this next chapter of his professional life. His story is an inspiring testament to the power of dedication, resilience, and continuous self-improvement. Please, audience, give a warm welcome to Mr. Griff Whalen. Griff, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Charlie, thanks for having me.
So I want to start with, the obvious one, football. When did you get into it? When did you fall in love with it? Where were you first exposed? And obviously playing at Stanford, playing alongside, a really well-known NFL and Stanford football player and Andrew Luck, and maybe even like being roommates at the time. What got you into football and what led you to Stanford?
Yeah, I think growing up in the Midwest, it's just kind of a way of life. I mean, watching college football every Saturday, pro football every Sunday, and then going to high school games on Friday nights too. So as far back as I can remember, just loved a lot of sports, but football in particular, and really didn't play seriously until 7th grade. Myself was the first year we had like a school tackle football team, and I was doing other sports, but didn't do the Pop Warner stuff before that. So that was kind of my first year, like really full time into it.
So from 7th grade, you go through high school. When in your high school career did you think, oh, okay, this could help me get to college? And did you always want to go to Stanford, or was it kind of the best opportunity that came with the football, the education piece at that decision point?
Yeah, I really viewed football as just a love and a passion, and I didn't even think of it honestly as a way to get me into college. And I played quarterback in high school, pretty undersized quarterback, and I was not heavily recruited by colleges. So I remember making highlight tapes and putting them in the mail and sending them out, and getting a few responses, mostly from like D2 and D3 schools, where there was some interest. I also pursued a little bit lacrosse and exploring playing that in college. But I honestly totally viewed it as like, just, I love doing this. Not necessarily as a way to get into school, but just as a thing I would love to do in addition to school, just because it's such a meaningful part of my life. Um, so and going back to Stanford where I ended up, that was not like a big circled name on my list. I was looking for an opportunity where I could get a great education and also hopefully continue my passions of football or lacrosse or something like that. And so like I said, sent highlight tapes all over the place, went to camps, called coaches, and Stanford was one of the ones that responded, and talked to Jim Harbaugh on the phone, and then he sent DJ Durkin out to visit my school and sit down with me, and they kind of told me like, hey, we think you're a talented football player and like would love to have you join the team as a walk-on if you get into school. And so that put Stanford right at the top of my list. I was like, this is perfect. At this point, I don't necessarily have I don't have any Division I scholarship offers. I'm not thinking about how I'm going to go play pro ball. I'm just thinking about where I'm going to get a good education and continue um, you know, continue playing the sport that I love. So Stanford went right to the top of the list as somewhere where I could do that. I could get a great education, could be a walk-on on the team, participate. Goal was to work my way up the depth chart and find some play time. But even if I never did, I think it would have been the right opportunity for me.
And so what does that look like when you go from, sending in highlight reels and things like that? What's the walk-on process at a D1 school like Stanford, a Division I football program with a guy like Jim Harbaugh coaching at that moment? You get into Stanford and then you go to try and walk onto the team. You talked about the challenge of like sending out these tapes and not getting responses. And firstly, I mean, the podcast is called Speed Bumps. We're going to talk about overcoming challenges here. How do you keep the mindset of, this is still a passion. I still love this despite not even getting responses, let alone getting not interested. It's just no response. How do you turn that into, okay, I'm still going to go play football. I'm still going to go figure out a way to work this passion into my collegiate career, my collegiate lifestyle. So keep that mindset positive and focused on that. And then what's the process of the walk on look like, and say, okay, yeah, maybe I'm fourth or fifth on the depth chart now. How do you continue to apply yourself to get to that number 2, number 3, number 1 playing spot?
Yeah. I mean, on the mindset, I didn't really realize until later that really there are guys using that as a stepping stone to get into schools, because sports can open doors like that. And that was a totally foreign idea to me, that somebody who didn't like playing football might pursue being on the football team as a way to get into the school or be on scholarship or something like that. And to me, it was the opposite, where like I wasn't on scholarship. They didn't have to pay me. I wanted to be there in training camp. I wanted to be at practice every day. So, that was my mindset of just, this is something I love doing. I'm gonna keep pursuing it as long as I love to do it. And was fortunate to find somewhere in Stanford where I could do that. I think otherwise, I was considering some Division II schools where I think I could have played and also gone to great schools. So, and then, on the what it was like, I think I can't speak to what it's like or how consistent it is across universities. I think Stanford did a great job, and Jim Harbaugh did a great job of making everyone feel relatively equal. I mean, there's subtle differences. I think scholarship guys had been there a little earlier, starting with some kind of pre-camp workouts and things like that. Obviously, there's financial differences, just getting tuition, textbooks, meals, things like that that are covered by the university. Um, but there wasn't, like a separate locker room for the walk-ons. It was Jim Harbaugh cultivated a like competitive atmosphere, and like that means everyone's competing. Just because you're on scholarship doesn't mean your position is secured, and like that's one thing that he was great at, was just um, really getting that competition maximized from everybody.
Yeah, I find that it's really interesting when you use competition as a motivating factor for people. Okay, so we just talked about the process of getting into Stanford, walking onto their football team with Jim Harbaugh, the coach. What does it look like when you're going through your collegiate career, right? In balancing the workload of trying to play football at a higher level and continuing to be a higher and higher level in football, but also focusing on your studies. I think we hear a lot about, especially in this day and age of the NIL and players getting compensation, that maybe academics aren't as much a focus for collegiate athletes, but then also there's some schools that really hang their hat and pride themselves on being an institution where athletes come and play sports, but also leave with a degree and leave with the education to be successful post sports life. How did that balance in that workload work for you, and what was the biggest challenge at that point?
Yeah, I I've thought many times about how difficult or impossible I think that would be for me to go do again now in my 30s. Lot of late nights, a lot of just cramming stuff in. But I was, I think, fortunate in a lot of the resources that Stanford provides, and not just to athletes but to all the students, to help kind of balance everything. And definitely helped to look at my peers too and learn from them and how they kind of are scheduling things and arranging things. But it almost felt like you just kind of, it's like sink or swim. You kind of just are forced to, you've got football at this time, you've got class at this time, you've got to fit in, homework and studying and whatever else you have to do in between that. And like it just and then you got to fit in like some social time too. So it just, it almost I certainly didn't feel like I had free time, and I wasn't bored. But that was great for me. And like I think what helped me was really enjoying what I was doing. I mean, enjoying football every day, enjoying like the schoolwork, very challenging, but like I don't know, I think I'm just like a lifelong learner. I like growing and learning and being challenged. And so definitely having a positive mindset about it helps. Of like, uh, I get to do all these things instead of I have to do all these things. So I think that might be the biggest thing. Sorry, one of my doggies is coming to say hi.
We're always happy to have furry friends on this show. We got a couple dogs at home, so I totally get that. So as you go through your college career, graduate, have a degree, um, and I apologize, I did not look this up, so you'll have to educate me. But did you declare for the NFL draft? Were you thinking football was going to be a career at that point? It started as a passion, but you're like, it's going to be something that I get to do, not it's the only thing I'm going to do to get to college. When you look at moving into the league, into the NFL and professional football, did you declare for the draft? Were you disappointed that your name wasn't called in the draft? That where did you go from there? Was it back to making highlight reels and and sending them to coaches and prospect teams, what is that? I don't know, right? In racing, it's a very different process. There aren't collegiate IndyCar programs. There isn't any sort of ladder within an education system, and there isn't a draft in racing. What does that process look like? And what did it look like for you then joining as a team as an undrafted free agent?
Sure. I think the first part of your question was like, when did I start thinking about that? And I think, my sophomore year started to play more. Junior year was able to play, actually play a lot and contribute. And I think it was really kind of that transition from junior to senior year where I saw some older guys making NFL teams, and having played with them, having seen, the work they put in and the steps that they took, kind of believing like I could do that too. And I will say now, looking back, that I had a high level of naivety and maybe overconfidence, which honestly is probably a good quality to have in that, just being confident and believing in yourself is a total necessity. I think when there's just that level of competition and that much pressure, I think you have to just totally believe in yourself. And looking back now, I think of kind of how naive my perspective was of how confident I was that I'd make a team and have any NFL career. And so for me, I declared for the draft, sat there watching it every day, didn't have my name called. And again, maybe a little naive, but yeah, I was disappointed I didn't expect to be drafted in, first couple rounds, but I had hope for kind of a mid or later round. So was undrafted. I think I had 2 or 3 teams call kind of on the last day as the rounds are wrapping up, like, hey, if you don't get drafted, we'd love to sign you as a undrafted free agent. And that's kind of the next best thing if you're not drafted, is to just be signed right away. You get to go to the kind of immediate mini camp after the draft. Because if you're not signed then, you're just kind of waiting for either somebody in one of those camps to get hurt or not quite make a good impression and get in later. So yeah, one of those teams was the Indianapolis Colts, and talked with my agent, my family. They were really positive about kind of the future they saw for me and having me there. Drafting Andrew Luck and Kobe Fleener, 2 of my Stanford teammates, just made it pretty compelling in my mind and everyone in my family's mind of especially that quarterback receiver connection that we had built over 4 years. And there's a lot of value in that. And we felt there was too. So that helped make that decision. And one of the other calls was from Jim Harbaugh at San Francisco 49ers. And so that was tempting too. I think there was maybe in our minds a little merit to going somewhere with a different coach where it's not a you kind of making it on your own type of thing, I guess. So yeah, that's how I ended up in Indianapolis. I was signed as a undrafted free agent basically right after the draft. Flew out for a mini camp. I think there's a 3-day mini camp shortly after the draft. And then maybe another one before training camp starts. And then, because of that situation, Andrew and I made a trip down to Miami together to work out with Reggie Wayne. And that was such a cool experience. I think there was maybe 3 or 4 other guys that kind of flew down there to meet Reggie, and he had us all hooked up at the U to work out and learn, start practicing some of the routes and offense and stuff like that. And so that was pretty cool too.
And so as you go through this, where and when you talked about being a constant learner in your life and your careers, when does choosing or the decision, the conversation around going vegan and eating clean come in? And I really want to talk about, how do you teach an NFL locker room, your teammates, your trainers, your coaches about veganism, and were there many headwinds with that process?
Yeah. So it came up like early in my career, somewhere between 2012 2013, and I really just I was learning more about how, starting in college, I was learning more about diet and how to really try to optimize just my athletic performance and like how much progress I could make getting stronger and faster and just developing physically through that time. And that was the first time I really started to become aware and focus on the diet portion of that. And so that continued my interest in like learning more about that. I just saw a documentary. I think it's about the Engine 2 diet. I'm not sure the exact name of the documentary, but it's Engine 2. A guy named Rip Esselstyn, who's actually here in Austin where I am now. And he had made a documentary where he just kind of goes around with some families and talks about some of the benefits of a plant-based diet. He goes through their kitchens with them, throws food away, takes them shopping, teaches them some recipes, that kind of thing. I thought it was pretty interesting. And then I think they had a like 28-day challenge type thing on their website, and they also had a lot of recipes and meals and things like that. And so I think it was an off season, and I was like, I'm gonna try that. It sounds like a great way to just at the very least kind of detox and clean everything out, and hopefully feel great and reset a little bit. And it's a pretty it's not just plant-based. It's a pretty strict diet of like no oils, no refined sugars, on top of no meat, dairy, those other things. So, I mean, it's really clean. It's not just because you can be just as unhealthy on a vegan diet as you are on any other diet. So it's a really clean diet, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna try that. And probably a week to 2 weeks into it, I just couldn't believe how good I felt. I mean, in so many ways, like sleeping better, like joints just all felt better, like body inflammation had gone down. And it's kind of one of those things where you live with it your whole life, so that's your normal. So you don't know that you've got some like stiffness or whatever it is, and like all of a sudden that goes away and you're like, holy cow, like this feels amazing. And like even training and running and stuff, like breathing was easier. Started to notice recovery was faster. And so started to do some research into why that was. And that was really the first time I was like, I had intended to do a 28-day thing. It made me really think about, man, I should keep learning about this and do this long term. Like this is going to help my athletic performance so much. And so I did all 28 days. I remember afterwards I was still concerned about during the season and like really intense training, like getting enough protein and things like that. So I spent a couple months doing almost the same diet, but I think I added salmon back into my diet and I don't maybe a couple of things, um, but only for like a month or two, and then ended up cutting those back out too. Like mostly just as I continued to do research and get more comfortable with like this big shift. And yeah, like never. I felt like it gave me a huge edge, where very, a lot of guys were like myself, where like very few, at least it's probably a different sport to sport, but like not that many NFL guys were like really analyzing their diet very much. A lot of teams, I would imagine it's changed a lot just in the last few years, but like a lot of teams didn't have full-time nutritionists. It was just kind of a afterthought, um, at at that time. I think less so than it probably is now. But I felt like it made a huge huge difference for me.
And so then when you get through that off season, you're continuing this like clean nutrition mentality, and you go into the locker room, and I think you're right. It definitely has changed. I think there are more. Everyone looks for advantages, right? There's always looking for an edge in sports, for in competition. In racing, we're always pushing the limit, the letter of the law, and actually, I want to go back a little bit. You talked about that quarterback receiver connection. That sort of you spend a lot of time, that familiarity, and it's very similar with a driver and a race engineer. The driver can almost start to say something and the engineer will finish his sentence. And to me, it feels a lot like that quarterback receiver piece, where the quarterback can throw the ball knowing the receiver is going to be there when the ball gets there. He's not there now, and he's not even made that cut. He's not even headed in the right direction, but he knows that when he throws and releases that pass, the receiver will be there to get it. And it's very similar in racing. And you talk about the ways to find an advantage for you as an athlete, feeling better, recovering quicker, training stronger, easier was a huge advantage. When you walk into the locker room for training camp and then during the season, and you say, hey, and I'm eating clean, this is what, did you have to go to the training staff and say, hey, this is what I need stocked for game day, this is what I need stocked for practices and training camp? Or was it, here, let me bring a cardboard box of all the stuff that I'm going to snack on and have food wise? What did that process look like? And were there speed bumps along the way to having the opportunity to continue that clean nutrition into the season within a locker room?
Yeah, there were definitely challenges associated with that. I mean, I can imagine. So Indianapolis, I think, had like a kind of a head chef who was just in charge of the whole kitchen and the meal prep and the schedule and all that. I don't think they had a full-time nutritionist at the time. And I can imagine how like shocking that conversation probably was for them the first time of like, hey, here's kind of what I want to eat now. And to their credit, they were just like super supportive. I mean, okay, this is what you want, and like we can make sure these few things are available every day. Like we can have, something else on a schedule. And like, so I wasn't the only one on a sort of specific diet. But for me, I struggle with like, feeling like I'm a nuisance or, requiring more of anybody. And, so it was like, that was a challenge for me, was just to like ask for those things. And I kind of balanced it with like, what they could prepare, things that I thought I could just bring myself. But it really ended up working out pretty well, where like they did a great job of like, supporting that and providing a lot of the things that I needed. And then I would bring certain things. And I think both sides just being adaptable and like just really helped a lot. And uh in the locker room is interesting too. I and especially as I started moving around different teams and like going into new locker rooms and having new conversations, there was a lot of curiosity about it. And I wish I could have been a better I don't know, like coach or mentor for it, because a lot of times guys would start asking me about, so like, what are you eating and like why do you do that? And kind of like, you know, watch for a few days and maybe like, you know what, I think I'm gonna try it too. I'd be like, oh, that's great. Like, and maybe give them some recommendations. But I'll say that like it's a difficult transition to make. Food is very cultural. It's something you like kind of grow up doing a certain way your whole life. And if you're not, like I wasn't raised in any type of vegan type way, and like you have to like learn a bunch of new foods and like how to cook those foods and where to find those foods when you're traveling, and like and then what to do at family meals and holidays, and like there's a lot of like other things associated with it. So most of the time guys would be like, oh, I'm gonna try that, and a couple days into it they'd be like, I don't know what, I can't find anything to eat, like I can't do it.
Well, and I admit, I remember conversations being like, okay, but how do you get protein, right? And you being like, well, there are all these protein sources that are just plant based, and they're different, and I totally get the food's cultural, because very much. I mean, I remember when I was racing as a young driver in Europe, and I'd come home, and the first thing I wanted was, being in Southern California, I wanted to go to our local Mexican place and get a good, good burrito for dinner. And that was coming home to me. And so, having a complete mindset shift on what food is, and I when I was driving full time, I always looked at food as fuel, right? I related it to the gas tank in the race car, and I always tried to make as good a choices as possible. But it's hard, right? There is a level of complexity and challenge continuing to make those choices, make those decisions of, okay, this is the right food for my body right now. And the fact that in that first initial 28-day stretch, you saw such improvements initially that you were like, yeah, I'm all in. This is what I want to do. And um, I've always been, I had a huge amount of respect for that, because it's hard and it continues to be hard. Although, would you say that in the last 10 years, okay, probably 12 years since you started eating plant-based and really focused on being clean, there have been more options, there's more education? Would you say it's easier when you're traveling to find what you need?
Yeah, it's night and day different from when I started. I mean, so I was in Indianapolis, and I think I found one vegan restaurant. It was called like Buddha something, and it was like kind of middle nowhere, and just really kind of healthy grain bowls like type thing. And now I feel like, I mean, you can find stuff in any major city, like local things. Also, I mean, fast food, there's, even Burger King, Chipotle, you've got like options now. So it's totally different. There's um, lots of resources online, and I imagine there's lots of people you could hire to help kind of put a program together for you. So yeah, at the time it was, I didn't know any other, um, definitely not NFL guys. I'm not sure if any other, maybe a couple other athletes. Like that's kind of how I found or got connected to Rich Roll, just trying to find like other people doing that. So it felt fairly, not that vegan diet was new, but like for athletic purposes, that felt still like sort of new at that time. And then yeah, finding restaurant and food and resource options was a lot tougher then too.
Well, I think it's continuing to get better, and there's much better understanding about athleticism and performance and fuel for the body and food and how that all works out. And um, now I want to shift a little bit. Um, when you were playing football and you had a couple injuries here or there, as any sport where grown men run into each other at full speed quite often happens. As you were going through some of that recovery process and things like that, as a player in a sport that quite literally owns a day of the week in American culture, what was it like, A, recovering from injuries, and how did you continue to drive forward in that? And B, what was it like being in the spotlight, right? Like, yeah, okay, a racing driver, we're pretty well known, especially during the month of May living in Indianapolis, but as an NFL player, there are millions of people that watch those games every week. Did it ever go off the rails? Was it ever ugly? Because we've had a situation recently in racing where it got pretty bad, and a driver's fan base attacked another driver, through social media and things like that, and got really, really nasty. Um, did you have any situations during your career that you were like, oh man, this is hard, or I don't understand why they're saying this, or this coverage isn't fair? And who did you rally at that point to help you through that? Again, I'll go back to the name of the podcast here. Who did you rally to help you through those speed bumps to continue on down the path of playing football professionally?
The biggest one for me was the uh, infamous fake punt play in Indianapolis, and basically what happened was we had um, a fake punt play, obviously planned, and it just went like horribly wrong. Looked looked terrible, and afterwards, like I think our uh, main like PR guy was kind of came up to us and was like, let's just you know not dive into it. We'll let's talk about it. You get with your coaches, talk about it, review it. You know, don't need to comment on what happened now. Um, so that's kind of what we all said. Like, oh, didn't work. We'll watch the film. We'll like make corrections. The kind of go to statements, but um, yeah, for whatever reason, like because I was the one snapping the ball, I just and Colt Anderson was the one um, who moved into the quarterback position to like receive the snap. Um, we both just got like totally targeted as like just complete boneheads that like it was our fault for just being idiots and like doing the dumbest thing we could have done. And that was like I hadn't been real active on social media ever, but I had gotten some, like made a Twitter and an Instagram account before that, and so um, I think I made a good decision of just kind of like trying to stay away from that stuff. And I knew it was like kind of blowing up and became a big story, and like mostly me, but Colt too. The both of us were just like kind of being crucified for the worst play anybody's ever seen. And there was really and to Pat McAfee's credit, he came out later and kind of talked through why that happened and like what where the miscommunication actually occurred and how Colt was just doing what he was told. I was just doing what I was told. Like that's our job, is to, like, when you've got 11 guys doing different things, you kind of have to be in silos, and like you don't always know what everybody else is doing, but you know your job, and like that's an efficient way to work together. And so, to Pat's credit, he came out later and kind of like he was the first one, I think, to give more detail on like why that occurred and how that occurred. But I
And do I remember right that, like, there had been an injury earlier in the game, and so, like, the personnel grouping was different? So, so there was you talk about cascade of errors maybe that lead to an unfavorable outcome or suboptimal outcome. There were these other factors that, like, we as fans, even the media, weren't exactly aware of and didn't know until Pat and the coaches came out and were like, "Hey, these these people had to move around," and it was a next man up mentality. And then when that play calls, they hadn't practiced it all week, so they didn't know all the nuances that the people who had practiced it did.
Yeah, you're exactly right. There was an injury. I wasn't supposed to be in on that play. But I think I was often used, to just kind of fill in, even on things where I hadn't practiced, but I kind of just knew what to do. And so that was exactly what happened there. There was an injury, so I was thrown into that position, and yeah, so perfect way of describing it, with cascading miscommunications and errors. But um, yeah, I mean that was tough to like not try to defend myself or like throw somebody else under the bus, because it was not fun for sure. But like I think just sometimes that is the media, and like that is what being a team is about, and like it's um you know supporting each other, and not just like looking out for yourself all the time. So um yeah, and I think that was probably a year or maybe more later when Pat kind of really detailed what happened. So it had kind of passed by then, but um, you know, still appreciate him doing that, after the fact. But
So, okay, Pat helps on the after the fact, sort of explaining it. But in that moment, when you're in the thick of that, and there are all these voices going on within the media, who did you rely on the most? Was it yourself? Was it your manager, agent? Was it your coaches? Was it your teammates? Family? Who was sort of your rock, and someone that when you're like, oh man, this is really tough, like, who did you go to help you get across that hurdle?
I think I think all of the above. I mean, a lot of football coaches do a good job of um, almost creating a little dome, right, where you just keep your world small and like just try to block out a lot of that media and noise and distractions. And so like that helped, just trying to like not get sucked into it. Really great group of teammates and friends, um, in Indianapolis that I see every day that are supportive. And then, yeah, um, agent, family, like definitely family too. Just um, all those people like help with times like that.
No, absolutely. And so you talked about starting social media, and I'm sure you heard it plenty loud on social media. But if I'm not mistaken, you made a connection with your now wife, who is also a vegan athlete, a very successful vegan triathlete, through your social media account. If I, having come to your wedding and hearing a story about conversations through social media, with maybe some of your teammates and her, asking very clearly what her intentions were with you and vice versa. Um, how, once you connected with Maddie, on athletics and training and plant-based diets. And now, married with a couple of kids. And what does that look like from when you started to now? Um, navigating a couple of high performance athletes. You're not competing anymore, and well, at least not on the football field. You compete in a very different world within real estate. Myself being married with a couple of kids, I know there are a lot of speed bumps along the way there. But how did it start and grow from there to where you are now in Austin?
Yeah, we did meet through Twitter. You're correct. So, it was actually Rich Roll, who I just mentioned earlier, another podcaster like yourself, who had me on early in his show as a guest. And he was also somebody I reached out to early on as a high performing vegan athlete, and just trying to connect and like learn tips and things like that. And so somebody that I respected, and just saw him, I think shortly after I did an episode with him, just saw him retweet a blog post that Maddie, my now wife, had posted. And so they were like connections, and he had retweeted something of hers. And I don't know, I don't remember like who messaged who first, but we like connected on there, messaged a little bit. Just that's kind of all it was. And then messaged more. We ended up meeting up in person. This was right before I went to Miami after Indianapolis. And so I was in Miami at the time. And yes, kind of as soon as we met in person, it just ramped up very quickly. We never looked back. Started spending a lot of time just talking, and then spending time together. And then yeah, here we are now, almost 6 years married, 2 kids. And have been through a lot. I think speed bump and challenge wise, some of the biggest ones have just been dealing with the kind of uncertainty stress. So the longer I played football, the more that kind of business side wore me down, of just every day you're competing for your job, truly. And like you could get fired any day of the week, and sometimes it's not your fault. Sometimes hey Griff, we had two offensive tackles get hurt today. We need to sign somebody else. We need a roster spot. And so, I don't know how many times I was cut and re-signed, and practice squad, activated up and down, and then started to move around different cities, as you mentioned in the intro. And that started to weigh on me just as I was getting older too, the uncertainty of every day. And like yeah, that business side can be not fun. And then ultimately had an injury in Oakland that essentially kind of physically ended my career. It took a lot longer to recover than I or anybody else expected. And then mentally I was just ready to like do other things. And that's how I got into real estate. But, and then, to be honest, the most challenging time I think in my life has probably been, just recently, probably during the last kind of 12-18 months, experiencing like some real estate market cycles and turmoil, where the NFL, you've got, very little job security, but it's kind of market agnostic. It just continues. There's no stopping the NFL. Um, but real estate markets and anything that's market dependent is very different. And so, I had a couple years experiencing like just everything being great and positive. Um, and we went into this kind of inflationary high interest rate period where that just turned on its head. And then all of a sudden it was all bad news and everything was really difficult. Um, and so getting getting through that, and not just like, I think what made it so much more challenging was not just getting through it for myself, but getting through it with a wife and kids and a house, and like totally different situation where it felt like a totally different kind of pressure than the NFL did. So that that's been a real challenge. And um, I think I've learned to rely on like close friends and family and my wife, and like talking more when that stress is really high. And that's there's a lot of different ways to deal with it, but for me that certainly helps a lot, of just kind of once you get it out of your body and verbalize it, and it's feels less scary once you kind of break it down that way.
Yeah, and I can imagine it helps feeling like you have a team, right? You when you're sharing that stress and that concern, I've gone through it myself, right? When you keep it inside, it feels like this huge issue, and then you share it with your wife, and you share it with your family, you share it with your coworkers and people you're working with, and it, all of a sudden you're back in a team environment, and you rely on that strength from the team to get you through and keep you moving forward. um no, I completely get that, and sharing it definitely helps. Well, I appreciate your time. Now, here on Speed Bumps, we try and ask the same three questions to our guests at the end of the podcast. So, first and foremost, what's the best piece of advice you've ever gotten, and from whom did you receive it?
That's a great question. Um,
We try to ask the hard hitting ones here on Speed Bumps.
this came up today, but and it wasn't necessarily a a single time or a single phrase, but I think the sentiment was um, probably just from my dad, of like believing in yourself. I mean, I think that is, especially in what I was doing with sports as a professional athlete, and what I'm doing now, like as an entrepreneur. But in anything you do, I think that just inner confidence, self belief, is like one of the best and most critical things you can have. And something, again, it wasn't just like a one time mention, but just something consistently. I know my dad kind of installed in me, was like, it's just that encouragement, right? You can do this, believe in yourself. And I think that's probably the one.
Fair enough. Great advice. Always great advice. Number two, I'm a car guy, so I got to ask, what's your dream car? Do you have it in your garage, and do you have a plan to get it if you don't?
That's a tough one too. I definitely don't have my dream car. I've got a Ford Explorer, and it's great. I think that used to be easier before the whole EV thing. And now I don't know if my dream car is like totally EV or hybrid, or just like, kind of cliche like Ferrari or something. But
Yeah,
yeah, I think like, um, can I give it can I give it two answers?
absolutely. It's your answer. You can give me a couple answers.
Yeah, I think if I got a car, I'd like to do the kind of try the EV thing and the environmental aspect is something I care a lot about, and also ties into the reason I continue to have a plant-based diet. So I'd probably look at a Rivian. I think those are pretty cool. And then take the budget aside. I don't know. I've always loved G-Wagons. I'd probably have to go for that.
Fair enough. All right. Last question before we let you go. We talked about professional athletes. We get some really cool opportunities to meet some really interesting individuals. What is the coolest personal or most interesting, most significant, impactful personal interaction you've had with someone? Who was it, and why did it matter so much in that moment?
Yeah, man. You're right. I mean, we get to meet a lot of cool people, and I've been fortunate to meet a lot of just incredible people. I think one that sticks out and probably always will is Tiger Woods. Stanford guy, so he'd be around at football games every now and then, and talked to the team a couple times. Just like hearing the man speak, and like especially in private, like the intensity and competitiveness that just is unparalleled and doesn't ever turn off.
Yeah.
It's just like different. Like I really think there's a few, Michael Jordan, Tiger, like there's a few guys that are just different type of competitive, and like it's yeah, I think just like seeing that was impactful. Of like, you think you're being competitive or you think you're working hard, there's more you could do. Like you could always do a little more. So I think that was the one for me.
Well, awesome. Griff Whalen, A, congratulations on an incredible NFL career. B, congratulations on what has already been successful, and I know will continue to be a successful entrepreneurship career within real estate and real estate investing. Thanks for sharing your story about getting to the NFL, going plant-based, and what that did, sharing a couple of the speed bumps along the way. And again, thank you for your time, and look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Yeah, you bet. Look forward to seeing you.